At the scene of the car crash, I pooled every last drop of my strength to beg my daughter for help. But she stepped right on my bleeding hand, walking past me to save her biological mother, who only had a few minor scratches. Shivering from the coldness of her betrayal, I choked out a question, asking her why. She just sneered, her eyes dripping with contempt. Did you really think I didn't know? You only adopted me to use me for your social status. My real mother is a billionaire. And you? You're just a stepping stone on my way to the top. I died in that cold street, consumed by hatred, while she went on to win fame and fortune, living the luxurious life of an heiress she had always dreamed of. But when I opened my eyes again, I had traveled back in time, right before the fatal crash. This time, I'm going to personally hand you back to them, Chloe. The excruciating pain of being crushed to death by a runaway truck still seemed to linger on my skin. The scream was still trapped in my throat. I gasped, my eyes flying open as I frantically took in my surroundings. I was in my own bedroom. Was I really dead? Was this the afterlife? My heart hammered against my ribs as I threw off the blanket, ready to put my shoes on and investigate. Suddenly, a haughty, annoyed voice drifted in from the doorway. Jane, what is wrong with you? Why are you sleeping so late? I just got back from school, and there's no food on the table. I'm starving. The face of the speaker flashed in my mind, and my fingers tightened around the bedsheets until my knuckles turned white. It was Chloe. Memories of the crash rushed back. When the truck hit us, she didn't call 911 for me. She didn't try to pull me out of the wreckage. Instead, she dragged her biological father, who only had a few scratches, away from the scene, leaving me to bleed out and die. The sheer anger in my chest was almost impossible to control. Seeing that I didn't reply, she walked in, rolling her eyes. Jane, are you listening to me? I'm talking to you. I forced my voice to remain steady. What year is it, Chloe? Chloe gave me a weird, judgmental look. Did you sleep your brain away? It's 2025. Rebirth. I actually came back. That realization snapped me back to reality. For the first time, I actually looked at this girl. I had raised her since she was 3 years old. Even at 3, she knew I wasn't her biological mother. No matter how much love, warmth, and patience I gave her, she refused to call me mom. It was always just Jane. She never accepted me, but she certainly never hesitated to spend my money and leech off my resources. She had even used my position as the chief of surgery at the city's top hospital to secretly dig into her biological parents' background. It turned out she had never wanted to be by my side. She only tolerated me because of my high social status and wealth. The second she found out her biological parents were billionaire entrepreneurs who could offer her an even more lavish lifestyle, she checked out. I had no doubt that if her biological parents had been blue-collar workers, she would have pretended they didn't exist. I still remembered my dying moments, the sheer desperation as I screamed at her with my last breath. Chloe, I raised you for years. I gave you everything. How can you be so heartless? Chloe had stopped, looking back at me with a cold, disgusted expression. You're just a glorified doctor and employee. How can you compare to my billionaire parents? If it weren't for you holding me back, I would have been living the life of a trust fund heiress long ago. Stop blocking my path to a better life. With that, she walked away, leaving me with nothing but her cold, retreating back. Thinking of this, my heart ached again. Even though she had always been rude, demanding, and bratty, I had foolishly believed that a human heart wasn't made of stone. I thought if I kept loving her, she would eventually accept me. But reality had slapped me hard in the face. No matter how hard I tried, she was a viper that could never be warmed. I took a deep breath, and a bright smile broke across my face. I waved her over to the bed. Chloe, do you want to know who your biological parents are? Since she wanted to go back to them so badly, why should I risk my life to stop her? But were her biological parents really the loving, perfect savior she imagined them to be? Maybe not. Hearing my question, a flicker of confusion crossed Chloe's face. In this house, her adoption was a taboo subject. Even though we both knew she wasn't mine, neither of us ever brought it up. Yet today, I was the one bringing it up. Her expression practically screamed. Asterisk, did you lose your mind? Asterisk. But she couldn't hide her excitement. If her biological parents were incredibly rich and powerful, her future would be set. She looked at me, pretending to be sweet. Jane, you know that after all these years, I've always seen you as my real mom. Even though I've always wanted to know where I came from, it was just to get some closure. Don't worry, you'll always be number one in my heart. Listening to her fake, hypocritical words, I had to hold back a cold laugh. She was just trying to play nice to get the information out of me. Once she had it, she would kick me to the curb without a second thought. To have such a scheming mind at such a young age, I really had been blind. I pulled up an article on my phone and slid it across the mattress toward her. This conglomerate is one of the top enterprises in the country. The CEO, Richard Sterling, is your long-lost biological father. Chloe froze. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide as she looked at the massive corporate headquarters shown in the article. A few seconds later, she snatched the phone wildly, scrolling down until she saw the chairman's headshot. Sure enough, she shared some striking physical resemblances with him. She instantly fell into a state of hysterical joy. I knew it. I knew someone as beautiful and smart as me couldn't have come from ordinary people. Looking at her, I didn't see the joy of a child finding her lost family. I only saw greed, lust for power, and money. I shook my head slightly. She was still too young, only seeing the glittering surface without realizing the dark truth behind it. Once the initial shock wore off, she didn't even bother to hide her disdain for me anymore. She tossed my phone back onto the bed. You knew who they were this whole time? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Were you trying to keep me here? Did you steal me from them in the first place? Her sudden accusation actually made me laugh out loud. I had legally adopted her with flawless paperwork. How did I suddenly become a kidnapper? I looked her dead in the eye. Now you have your answer, and you seem thrilled with who your parents are. Why are you still standing in my room? Do you want to keep pretending we have a loving mother-daughter relationship? Chloe rolled her eyes at me, then stuck her palm out. Give me money. I need to go find them. I seriously wondered what was inside her brain. I gave you a massive allowance every month. Where did all that money go? She scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. That pocket change? What was I supposed to do with that? If you wanted to raise a billionaire's child, you should have looked in the mirror first. Hurry up and give me cash, or I'll tell my parents you abused me when I go back. I stood up from the bed, took a $10 bill from my nightstand, and slapped it right onto her face. That's all the money you're getting from me. Given our bond, even this is too much. Now get out of my house. Looking at you makes me sick. I walked back into my room and slammed the door shut. Soon, the sound of her stomping footsteps faded from the hallway. Asterisk Chloe, your nightmare is about to begin. That night, while I was in bed with a face mask on, reading a book, my best friend, Sarah, called me in a panic. Jane, how can you be doing skincare right now? Turn on the TV quick. Chloe is on the news. She's crying on camera with her biological parents. God, anyone watching would think you kept her in a basement. Intrigued, I turned on the TV. Sure enough, the screen showed Chloe hugging her chubby, middle-aged biological father. She was blinking rapidly, trying to squeeze out a few tears for the camera. All these years away from my parents, I never gave up hope. I searched everywhere, trying every channel to find them. And finally, heaven answered my prayers. I'm back where I belong. The reporter eagerly held out the microphone. Miss Sterling, today is such a historic day for your family. Why isn't your adoptive mother here? Is there tension between you? How does she feel about you finding your real family? Chloe lied without blinking. I don't have an adoptive father, just a very ordinary adoptive mother. She's never seen such a grand lifestyle, so she was too embarrassed to show her face today. I think she feels guilty for not being able to provide for me all these years. But I don't blame her. In fact, I'm grateful to her. My mouth twitched. Chloe's words sounded polite, but they were actually a nasty dig, painting me as a poor, low-class woman who was too intimidated to step into high society. It was a clever play to make herself look elegant, mature, and forgiving. As Sarah ranted in my ear, my eyes remained glued to the interaction between Chloe and her parents. Her parents didn't look like they had just found their long-lost daughter. Instead, they kept pushing her toward the cameras, making sure the lenses were focused on her pretty face. It felt like they were showing off a high-quality product rather than a child. But Chloe, blinded by her sudden wealth, didn't notice anything wrong. She smiled and played along perfectly, her smile looking more like a brown-nosing employee trying to please her bosses rather than a girl reuniting with her parents. Her father even bragged to the reporters. My daughter is only a teenager. She is young, fresh, beautiful, and attends an elite private school. The phrasing made my skin crawl. What kind of father describes his own daughter as fresh? And if they loved her so much, why didn't they even get her age right? A flash of awkwardness crossed Chloe's face, but she quickly covered it up with a laugh. My parents are just too excited. They're even getting my age mixed up. I think I'll have to punish them by making them go jogging with me tonight. She reached out to grab her mother's hand, trying to lean her head on her shoulder. But Eleanor, her mother, instinctively stepped back, pulling her hand away. For a second, both of their expressions stiffened. Though Eleanor quickly recovered and claimed she just wasn't used to public displays of affection, it was obvious to anyone paying attention that there was zero bond between them. After the interview aired, a wave of online hate was directed at me. Netizens called me an irresponsible, neglectful adoptive mother, while praising Chloe for being sweet and beautiful. I didn't care, because I knew Chloe's golden days were already numbered. 3 days after the news broadcast, the online storm reached its peak. My hospital email was flooded with angry messages, and a few tabloid journalists even tried to sneak into the surgical wing disguised as patients. I didn't waste a second arguing. I handed the security footage of Chloe stealing my money, along with her signed legal relinquishment papers, straight to the hospitals. legal department and instructed them to issue a quiet, factual statement. While the public was still arguing over whether I was a cold-hearted adoptive mother, Chloe was living in what she believed was paradise. On her social media accounts, which had gained over 200,000 followers overnight, she posted daily updates of her new life at the Sterling Manor, morning tea in the Rose Garden. So blessed to finally be surrounded by real elegance. Dad bought me 3 Birkin bags today. He said a Sterling girl deserves only the best. In the photos, she wore silk dresses, heavy pearl necklaces, and posed in front of sweeping marble staircases. To the outside world, she was the ultimate lucky girl who had reclaimed her rightful place among the elite. I sat in my office at the hospital, sipping black coffee, scrolling past her posts. I zoomed in on a photo she had uploaded 2 hours prior. She was sitting at a long mahogany dining table, holding a silver fork. Her smile was wide, but if you looked closely at her wrist, beneath the delicate lace cuff of her designer dress, there was a faint, angry red ring. It wasn't jewelry. It was a pressure mark from a restraint. And on her plate sat 3 unadorned pills beside a small bowl of unsalted steamed chicken. I set my phone down and leaned back in my leather chair, letting out a slow exhale. So it's already started. The Sterlings weren't just a wealthy real estate family. In medical circles, Richard Sterling's name was whispered for entirely different reasons. 3 years ago, during an international medical ethics conference in Geneva, a confidential report had circulated regarding Sterling Biotech, a subsidiary company Richard owned in an offshore territory. They specialized in illegal cosmetic cellular therapies and underground organ brokerage for elderly, ultra-wealthy clients. And Richard Sterling himself was 80% blind in his left eye, suffering from advanced diabetic nephropathy. He needed a matching kidney and liver lobe transplant within 6 months, or his multi-billion-dollar empire would crumble into bankruptcy. Chloe thought she was returning to be a pampered princess. She had no idea she had walked straight into a slaughterhouse as the primary donor. By the end of the second week, Chloe's social media posts suddenly stopped. The grand, daily updates of high tea and luxury shopping hauls vanished, replaced by an eerie silence that her followers barely noticed amid the fast-moving news cycle. On a rainy Thursday night, I was finishing up a late-night emergency appendectomy when my personal phone rang. It was an unknown, encrypted number. I picked it up, stepping into the quiet, sterile hallway outside the operating theater. Hello? Silence answered me for 3 seconds, filled only by the sound of ragged, wet breathing. Then a trembling, terrified whisper came through the speaker. Jane, please help me. It was Chloe. Her voice wasn't the arrogant, sneering tone she had used when she stepped on my bleeding hand in my past life. It was small, cracked, and breathless with sheer terror. I didn't answer right away. I leaned against the cold tile wall, checking my watch. Jane, are you there? Her voice broke into a desperate sob. I could hear the muffled sound of slamming doors and distant shouting in the background. Hey, please don't hang up. I'm locked in the 3rd-floor wine cellar. They took my passport and my phone. I'm using an old landline behind the barrels. Miss Sterling, I said, my voice as calm and flat as a lake in winter. You have the wrong number. Your mother is Eleanor Sterling. You should call her. No, they aren't my parents. They're monsters. Chloe shrieked, her voice shaking violently. They aren't giving me money. They forced me to sign 3 stacks of medical consent forms. They told the doctors I'm an organ donor for Richard. She gasped for air, weeping hysterically into the receiver. And Eleanor is marrying me off. Jane, they made an agreement with Arthur Vance, that creepy 60-year-old shipping tycoon. They're trading me for a $50 million corporate loan. He hit me, Jane. Richard slapped me across the face because I refused to try on the wedding dress today. My face is bleeding. Please, Jane, come pick me up. I want to go home. I swear I'll be good. I'll call you Mom. I'll do all the chores. Just come save me. Listening to her pathetic weeping, I felt no pity. My mind drifted back to the cold, wet asphalt of the highway in my past life. I remembered the weight of her designer heel pressing down on my broken fingers. I remembered her cold, disgusted eyes looking down at my dying body. You're just a stepping stone on my way to the top. Chloe, I said softly, my voice laced with a gentle, terrifying sweetness. Yes, Jane. Are you coming? Do you remember what you told me the day you left my house? I asked. You told me that if it weren't for me holding you back, you would have been living the life of a trust fund heiress long ago. Chloe went dead silent on the line. You told me stop blocking your path to a better life. I continued smoothly. I'm just being a good adoptive mother, Chloe. I'm staying out of your way. Jane, no. I was wrong. I was stupid. I was just a kid. She wailed, her fists pounding frantically against the wooden door on her end. "They're coming. I hear their footsteps. Jane, please. I'm your daughter." "You never called me Mom," I said flatly. "And you never will." Click. I disconnected the call, blocked the encrypted number, and walked back into the scrub room to wash my hands. 2 days later, the Sterling family made national headlines again. Sterling conglomerate announces engagement of newly found daughter to shipping magnate Arthur Vance. The press release was accompanied by a photograph taken in the Sterling Grand Ballroom. Chloe stood between Richard Sterling and a fat, bald 58-year-old man with a greasy, arrogant smile. She wore an off-the-shoulder white lace gown that looked remarkably like a shroud. Her face was caked in heavy foundation, but even under the bright professional studio lights, you could see the dark, swollen shadow along her left jawline. Her eyes were completely dead. She stared at the camera like a prisoner walking toward a firing squad. That evening, I received an official corporate invitation at my hospital office. Because the engagement gala was being held at the Grand Regent Hotel. And because Arthur Vance wanted the city's top medical figures present to demonstrate his philanthropic ties, invitations had been issued to all department heads at the City General Hospital, including the chief of surgery. My best friend, Sarah, walked into my office holding her invitation, looking at me with deep concern. "Jane, you're not actually going to this, are you?" Sarah asked, tossing the card onto my desk. "The whole city knows how that ungrateful girl threw dirt on your name. Going there will just give the paparazzi a chance to turn you into a spectacle." I picked up the heavy, gold-embossed card, running my thumb over the raised lettering of Chloe's name. "Of course I'm going." I smiled, setting it down neatly beside my scalpel case. "It's a celebration, Sarah. How could I miss my former daughter's big night?" Sarah stared at me, shivering slightly. "Jane, why are you smiling like that? You look like you're about to perform an autopsy." "Not an autopsy," I corrected gently, pulling out a USB drive from my desk drawer. "Just a routine health check." The Grand Regent Hotel was a sea of black ties, diamonds, and flashing camera bulbs. Over 300 members of the city's high society packed the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, casting a blinding glare over the champagne towers and ice sculptures. Richard Sterling stood near the center stage, wearing a tailored tuxedo, holding a glass of vintage wine. He looked energetic on the outside, but as a surgeon, I could see the subtle yellowing in the sclera of his eyes and the slight edema around his ankles. He was running out of time. Beside him stood Eleanor, wearing an emerald gown, chatting pleasantly with Arthur Vance. And standing half a step behind them was Chloe. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been cracked and glued back together. Her white dress was tight, far too tight, and her posture was unnaturally stiff. 2 large, broad-shouldered security guards in plain clothes stood less than 3 feet behind her at all times. When I walked into the ballroom wearing a sleek, midnight blue silk trouser set, the ambient noise in the room noticeably dimmed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Look, it's Dr. Jane Vance. The adoptive mother? Why is she here? Did the Sterlings invite her just to humiliate her?" Chloe turned her head. When her hollow eyes met mine across the crowded floor, a violent tremor passed through her entire body. Her lips parted. A look of wild, desperate, pathetic hope flared in her eyes. She instinctively took a step toward me, but the security guard behind her instantly reached out, his heavy hand clamping down on her shoulder with enough force to make her wince in pain. Richard Sterling noticed the commotion. He turned, saw me, and a cold, arrogant smirk spread across his fat face. He picked up a champagne flute, tapped it with a silver spoon, and stepped up to the central microphone on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends, investors, and esteemed guests." Richard's voice boomed through the sound system. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate the bright future of the Sterling family and our union with Vance Logistics." The crowd applauded politely. "As many of you know," Richard continued, his eyes drifting toward me with pure condescension, "my daughter Chloe spent 17 years away from us. She was raised in modest, unfortunate circumstances by an adoptive parent who, frankly, lacked the resources and vision to guide a girl of her stature." A few quiet chuckles echoed from his corporate cronies. "But blood always finds its way back to gold," Richard sneered softly into the mic. "Tonight, Chloe returns to where she belongs. She enters a union that will secure the financial and social dominance of our family for generations to come." He waved his hand toward Chloe. "Chloe, sweetie, come up here and join your father and your fiancé." Chloe didn't move. She stood frozen on the floor, her hands trembling so violently that the champagne glass she held rattled loudly against her ring. "Chloe," Eleanor's voice came through the mic, sharp and warning despite her sweet smile. "Don't keep your father waiting." The security guard shoved her from behind. Chloe stumbled forward, her high heels catching on the carpet. She looked at the stage, then looked at Arthur Vance, who was licking his lips while looking at her with cold, predatory appetite. Then she looked at me. In front of 300 wealthy guests and dozens of news cameras, the proud, arrogant girl who had called me a stepping stone completely broke down. She fell onto her knees right there on the red carpet. "Jane," she shrieked, her voice tearing through the glamorous ballroom like a jagged blade. "Jane, save me. They're going to kill me. They're going to take my kidney tomorrow. Save me." The entire ballroom descended into utter, chaotic silence. The journalist's camera flashes went wild, a blinding storm of white light, illuminating Chloe kneeling in her ruined white gown, weeping frantically into the carpet. Richard Sterling's face turned from pale to an ugly mottled purple. "Security, get her up." Richard roared into the microphone, dropping his polished act completely. "She's hysterical. She's having a psychotic episode. Get her off the floor." The two heavy security guards lunged forward, grabbing Chloe by her arms, lifting her off the ground so roughly that the lace on her shoulder tore open. "Let go of me. Let go." Chloe screamed, thrashing wildly, her hair coming undone, mascara running down her cheeks in dark, ugly streaks. "Jane, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I stepped on your hand. I'm sorry I lied about you on TV. Please don't. Leave me with them. They're monsters." The crowd gasped. "Stepped on her hand? What is she talking about? Did you hear what she said? About a kidney transplant?" Arthur Vance's greasy smile vanished. He stepped back, glaring at Richard. "Sterling, what the hell is the meaning of this? You told me the girl was eager for the match." "She is eager. She's just nervous." Eleanor stammered frantically, trying to grab Chloe's arm. "Shut her mouth. Put a hand over her mouth. Nobody touch her," a calm, authoritative voice echoed across the room. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stepped forward, holding my hospital executive badge and an official folder stamped with the seal of the State Department of Health and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Behind me, the heavy double doors of the ballroom were thrown open. 6 uniformed police officers and 4 federal agents marched into the hall, led by Senior Detective Vance, no relation to Arthur Vance. Richard Sterling stumbled back against the podium, his eyes bulging in sheer terror. What is this? "This is a private family event." Detective Vance pulled out a federal arrest warrant. "Richard Sterling, Eleanor Sterling," Detective Vance declared loudly, his voice echoing off the high marble walls. "You are under arrest for federal human trafficking, illegal organ procurement, corporate tax fraud, and unlawful confinement." "That's absurd. On what evidence?" Eleanor shrieked. I stepped up to the edge of the stage, looking down at the Sterlings. "On the evidence of Sterling Biotech's server logs," I said smoothly, "which were subpoenaed 2 hours ago after I submitted Chloe's encrypted voicemail and her preliminary blood compatibility reports to the State Medical Board." I looked at Richard's yellowed eyes. "You thought you were sneaky, Richard," I said softly. "You brought Chloe back because her HLA tissue typing matched yours 99%. You planned to perform an illegal liver and kidney extraction at your offshore clinic 3 days after her wedding to Arthur Vance, framing it as a post-nuptial surgical complication." The journalists went wild. The shouting of questions was deafening. "Is this true, Mr. Sterling? Did you adopt your daughter just to harvest her organs? Arthur Vance, were you aware of this agreement?" Arthur Vance didn't wait to answer. He turned on his heel, trying to slip out through the service exit, but 2 federal agents intercepted him immediately, snapping steel handcuffs around his thick wrists. "Get your hands off me. I have immunity," Vance screamed as he was hauled away. Eleanor fell to her knees, weeping in pure terror as officers cuffed her arms behind her back. Richard clutched his chest, gasping for air, his face turning blue as his failing kidneys finally gave under the massive spike in blood pressure. "Medical team, we need a gurney," Detective Vance yelled as Richard collapsed onto the stage floor. Within 5 minutes, the glamorous, multi-million-dollar gala had turned into a crime scene. An hour later, the ballroom was empty. The police had cleared the guests, the cameras were gone, and the floor was littered with overturned champagne flutes and crushed flower petals. Chloe sat on a plush velvet sofa in the corner of the foyer, wrapped in a coarse yellow police blanket. Her face was pale, her dark mascara smeared across her cheeks, shivering uncontrollably. Her biological parents had been hauled away in police vans, one to the county jail, the other to the ICU under armed guard. She was completely alone again. I stood near the glass entrance doors, finishing up my statement with Detective Vance. "Thank you, Dr. Vance," the detective said, shaking my hand warmly. "Without your medical analysis and the audio logs you provided, we wouldn't have had enough probable cause to secure the federal warrants before they shipped her offshore." Just doing my duty as a physician, detective, I replied politely. As Detective Vance walked out to his patrol car, Chloe pushed off the sofa. She dragged her blanket behind her, her bare feet stepping over the shattered glass on the marble floor, stumbling toward me like a ghost. Jane, she whimpered, stopping 2 feet away from me. I turned around, zipping up my black trench coat, looking at her with calm, clear detachment. The police are taking you to a temporary state shelter tonight, Chloe, I said, smoothly. Since the Sterling assets have been frozen by the federal government, you'll need to apply for state aid to finish your high school education. Chloe's lower lip quivered. She looked down at her bare, dirty feet, then looked up at my clean, elegant face. Jane, she sobbed, dropping the yellow blanket, reaching out to grab the sleeve of my coat. Can't I just come home with you? I don't have a big house like the Sterlings, she stammered frantically, her words tumbling over each other. I don't need Birkin bags. I don't need designer dresses. I'll eat whatever you cook. I'll sleep on the floor. Jane, please. I know you still care about me. You brought the police tonight. You saved my life. I looked down at her hand clutching my sleeve. Her fingers were dirty, trembling, nails bitten down to the quick. I slowly reached up with my gloved hand and peeled her fingers off my coat one by one. I didn't bring the police to save you, Chloe, I whispered, leaning down slightly so my voice reached only her ears. Chloe froze. What? I brought the police because I am the chief of surgery at City General. I said, my eyes cold as Arctic ice. It is my professional duty to expose illegal organ trafficking. I stepped closer, looking straight into her terrified, bloodshot eyes. And more importantly, I wanted you to live. Chloe blinked, a faint flicker of confusion crossing her face. You wanted me to live? Yes, I smiled, a cold, beautiful, merciless smile that made the hair on her neck stand up. Because dying on an operating table under anesthesia is far too easy, Chloe. I want you to live a long, long life. I want you to live in a cold, cramped rented room. I want you to work 12-hour shifts at a convenience store just to pay for cheap instant noodles. I want you to watch other girls wear pretty dresses while you scrub floors for minimum wage. I want you to spend the next 50 years remembering that you had a mother who loved you, who gave you everything, who built a future for you, and you threw it into the dirt for a pair of fake parents who saw you as a piece of meat. Chloe stared at me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her face went paper white, her breath catching in her throat as she realized the true, terrifying scope of my hatred. I hadn't saved her out of motherly love. I had saved her so she could endure the hell she had chosen for herself. No. No, Chloe shrieked, throwing herself onto the floor, grabbing at the hem of my trousers as I turned around. Mommy. Don't leave me. Please. Mommy. She screamed that word over and over again. The word she had refused to say for 15 years. The word I had prayed to hear when I was a foolish young mother. Now it sounded like nothing more than the screeching of a rusty hinge. I didn't pause my step. I didn't look back. I walked through the heavy glass doors of the Grand Regent Hotel, stepping out into the fresh, crisp night air. Behind me, 2 female police officers gently but firmly picked Chloe up off the marble floor, dragging her weeping, screaming figure toward the transport van. I pulled my collar up against the cool evening breeze, took a deep, clean breath of air, and walked forward into a life that was entirely, gloriously my own.